Welcome to the Creative Voices of Change, the podcast, where we'll dive into the rhythm of land, community, and creativity through conversations with artists. I'm your host, Anne-Isabelle Leonard. The conversation you'll be witnessing here come from a simple desire to make visible what usually go unseen. We're interested in quiet ways that artists act as change makers, shaping community, nurturing connection, and reminding us on how creativity can act as a powerful tool in upholding the challenges that we face today. We honor the long-term processes and commitments and the courage it takes to keep showing up. We'll share stories of creative practices, of bold yet subtle ideas, and community-rooted visions that remind us that the simplest ripple, may it be a poem, a gesture, or a song, can become a significant transformation. We believe art and the people who create it aren't at the sidelines of change, but at its heart. In this episode, I hiked with Ezra Beaton. Ezra is an Indigenous musician, artist, and farmer from the Kitwanga Valley, which is located between Hazelton and Terrace in Gitxsan territory. Ezra has been performing music solo, as well as with an array of bands, since the age of 9. He currently plays in his own group, the Ezra Beaton Band. Ezra plays a mix of folk, blues, and rock, and spends his free time drawing, painting, felting, walking in the forest around his home, singing, and playing guitar. Hey, Ezra, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Really good today. I mean, this view is magnificent.
It is. Yeah, it's a really special place to me. I'm really happy that we could do this here.
Yeah, me too. So welcome to the 5th episode of Creative Voices of Change, the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
And when we started podcasts, I started by asking a little bit about where we are, because I ask every creative to bring me to a special place.
Yeah.
So where are we? And tell us a little bit about this place.
Right now we're about, I don't even know how many meters above the Skeena River, but we're up on a viewpoint on my property. It's about a 15-20 minute walk from my house, and this is it's a special place to me because this is where I come to clear my head and just kind of live in the moment. I'll often walk my dogs up here. I have a couple dogs, and we come and we sit up here together and just kind of soak in the nature. And I've written a couple songs up here, and it's just I actually wrote my first song up here. So
no way.
It's a super, super special place to me.
It's crazy how we just have these little pockets in the land where it just calls us.
Totally.
What called you? I have a little feeling I know, but what called you about this spot here?
I think just the variety of things that I can see from this vantage point. I can see the mountains and the forests, and there's a great field down here. I don't think we're catching it in the shots, and the Skeena River is flowing down here, and the train tracks are right beside the river, so I can see a great combination of just kind of wild, natural things, and also some man-made things as well. And I think and how they exist together, I think is a really, really cool thing to me.
It's so nice to be able to see so far away.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I can see, I don't even know how far away that is, but we can see a long way from here. But at the same time, I'm so close to home, and it feels like home.
That's it, because we walk, 10 minutes?
Yeah, 10, 15 minutes, and we're here.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
That's the beauty about living up here.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's paradise.
Yeah.
I feel so lucky to be here.
You spoke about inspiration just now, just seeing everything around you.
Yeah.
And I stumbled upon an interview of you 3 years ago with
Yeah.
the Skina, and you were saying, I sort of grew up in music. We went to a lot of music festivals, so a lot of my influences were actually locals, just musicians I've met along the way, really. They've inspired me.
Yeah.
I was really curious because some of the videos that I saw online of you are a lot of, riffs and different musics from more of the old school classics,
Yes.
like the 60s and the 70s, the folk, the blues, the rock. So I was curious to ask you, like, what's your take about weaving the old and the new?
That's a really good question. I grew up, listening to a lot of older stuff, and I really love, old folk music, old rock. The stuff that I loved when I was young was all traditional Gitsan and Tsimshan and Haida music. And so that's a lot of the stuff that inspires me. And when it comes to weaving the old and the new, I kind of tend to stick to things that have an older feeling, that kind of harken back to older sounds and feels. But I am undeniably living in the modern times, and there are a lot of things that I think need to be spoken about and that inspire me in the modern world. Yeah, weaving stuff inspired by the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix with contemporary topics, and that's kind of where I'm comfortable.
What is it about that era?
I'm not totally sure. I think it's partially the simplicity of the music. It was all almost completely analog. A lot of the times artists like Jimi Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan would record live with maybe a few microphones in one room, playing the whole band together, and that's what I love to do. I love to jam out, and I love to have fun with the music, and I guess the newer stuff, there's a lot of new stuff that inspires me, but a lot of it feels like it can be overproduced or like it can be too polished. And so I find a lot of inspiration in the older stuff, I guess because of the simplicity and also the energy, just the raw energy back then, because rock and roll was new. Rock came out of gospel and blues from the 30s and 40s into the 50s. Rock and roll kind of started to blossom, and so it was such a new thing, and all that energy was still kind of blossoming in the 60s and 70s and 80s.
I'm feeling also in what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's the new, and there's also a big part of, I feel that's very personal, that rock and roll came in a sense of necessity also, like an energy from a generation that needed to really yell about things. Totally. and mixing poetry. I'm thinking about Patti Smith here, starting as a poet and then like discovering that she could put it on, guitars and different 100%. Beats and stuff and putting everything together. So I'm curious, because I feel like in what you're saying that there's a need for that kind of energy of being together and talking about important things. How does that reflect in what you're doing?
You touched on a good note there that I kind of had forgotten about, but I think it's like you said, it comes from a kind of, I guess, a rebellious spirit. And not to say that I'm trying to rebel by playing the music that I play, but rock and roll definitely came from a very oppressed part of culture. There are a lot of things today that I see and I feel and that I deal with that make me want to yell. They make me want to get up and scream and want to jump around, and then there's also things that make me want to smile and laugh, and those things also make me want to jump around and dance around and be loud. So I think that's a big part of rock music for me, is just being loud and being expressive and also being a little bit rebellious. Yeah.
I feel like it is rebellious in itself just to be like, in a world where all the technology is available, you're like, hey, I kind of want to be jamming and giving that energy, that raw energy where you really put yourself at risk also, right? Like the vulnerability of making mistakes live and recording one go. Like, how is that process for you?
It's really fun. Really, really fun and really scary. I kind of, in terms of playing live, I grew up with a lot of social anxiety, and I still deal with a lot of anxiety because of how unpredictable life can be. And I think performing can be unpredictable and crazy, but to a certain extent, it's very controlled. And when I'm, having a conversation or when I'm in social situations, I'll often deal with anxiety because I don't know what could happen next. I don't know what someone's going to say. I don't know what someone's going to do. But when I get up on stage, I feel kind of a sense of freedom because the songs that I'm going to play, I've practiced them hundreds, sometimes thousands of times in my bedroom. And so I find comfort in the knowledge that even if something goes wrong, I know how to deal with 99% of the things that could go wrong on stage. Versus in social situations where I'm dealing with sometimes a bunch of people at once that something could come completely out of the blue or completely out of left field. I don't know what I'm going to do.
And it's funny because I've played music back in the days, and one of the things that I'm classically trained, and then I discovered jamming much later in my life. Yeah. And I personally think I suck at it, but but I feel like that's the point of jamming. You kind of always suck, right?
Yeah, yeah. And that's also the point of practice, I think, is just like sucking a bunch of the time and then learning to not suck a little bit, like learning to suck a little bit less. But I think ultimately it's about having fun, like I hear a lot of people say, oh, I love playing music, but I kind of suck. I say, but why does that matter to you? Like, like the first half of that sentence is much more important than the second half of that sentence. I love playing music. Let's stick with that. Let's focus on that. As long as you're having fun, it doesn't really matter if you suck or not.
There's something that you said that was quite interesting to me where, of course, I highly relate with having quite a bit of anxiety, especially in social spaces. Totally. And there's so many dynamics to be having to deal with, and when you're hyper aware, it creates this kind of tension. And coming back to jamming, I feel like for me, jamming is a lot of learning to listen to there is some kind of communication, and you have to be constantly adapting. How does jamming help you develop different skills?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think I find a lot of my inspiration in jamming, or with watching live music, just because I'm sharing the space with other musicians, and I'm learning to listen, and I'm learning to make space for other musicians to play and to take a step back and to take a breath, and
that's huge.
Yeah, it's a huge skill that I'm still really working on. Is I'm kind of learning to stop. Like a lot of the time I'm like go, when I'm performing. I'm like, I want to make an impression. I want to be impressive. I want to put on a show. So sometimes I kind of go full throttle. But that's one thing that one valuable lesson that I've learned from other musicians is it's okay to stop. It's okay to stop and wait for a second, Like if you're playing a solo, stop and maybe leave a few seconds of silence, because sometimes less can be more. That was something that I really found a lot of value in learning when I was jamming out with other people, is you can just, if you stop a little bit, it makes the notes that you do play all that more special. Because I find I'm trying to fill space with all these notes, and I'm playing as fast as I can, and then sometimes I can just stop and then go again, and it's kind of I guess, an ebb and flow, if that makes sense. I don't know if that answers your question.
Totally. And I just know, like, when I go see a concert, and whether it be electronic or acoustic or anything, like that moment where the musician just decides to stop.
Yeah.
Like the crowd goes wild.
Yeah. And it can, like in electronic music, you can do a build up and then you stop and then the beat drops. And if you just did a build up and then the beat drop without a stop, it might not flow as well. So sometimes stopping can be the difference between a good moment and a bad moment, and a good reaction and a bad reaction.
You know, hosting you at the festival last year and hearing your music, for me it was the first time. And you started writing your own songs recently. You've said that you wrote your first song here. And there's so many of your songs seem really deeply rooted in lived experience, that were very, that are living in a tension between like beauty and strength, but also I felt some form of exhaustion and social, ecological grief as well. And so I was wondering, like, what role does words play in your life? Because like writing music, and it's poetry what you're writing, it's really beautiful. So
words play a really big role. My great-grandfather on my mom's side would read the dictionary for fun. He would sit down and read the dictionary for fun. That was, my mom grew up, when she would go to her grandparents' place, her Nana would be she would be spending time with the grandkids, and her grandpa would be sitting on the couch reading a dictionary. My mom's mom, my Nana, still has a lot of those dictionaries around, and she's big into the English language, and I found a big interest in the English language as well. It was one of the few subjects that I did well in school. When I was in school, I was homeschooled for most of my childhood, but when I was in school, English was where I was happy. I love words, and I love finding rhymes and finding words for the things that we feel and the things that we do and the things that we experience. And I read a lot of poetry, and I write a lot of poetry. All my songs start as poems. I never have a song that starts as I've had maybe one or two songs that have started with the melody, but almost all of them start with a line of poetry. And then that turns into a few lines, and maybe I'll start writing the melody halfway through and then write the rest of the lyrics to that melody. But they always start off as poetry. Images, words, colors, sounds, views. Yeah. This was like, I mean, I couldn't find a more inspiring place to be than this. Like, that was why I wrote my first song here. I was sitting here with my cousin eating a bag of chips, and we were looking at the river, and we started writing a song together. And that's just like, I find joy in words and in music, because they can bring us together in shared experiences. Even if you're writing about something very personal to you, chances are there's 100,000 people in the world that'll relate to those words that you're putting down on paper. Yeah.
It blows my mind every time, because it's, when you write from a personal experience and then it kind of blows up and you're like, whoa, like, how many people have lived that?
Yeah, or something like that,
Yeah, and I feel like music brings people together in such a powerful way sometimes. And how do you think music contributes in kind of affecting change in people?
Oh, it can do a lot. It can do a lot. I've experienced that firsthand, with music, where music has changed me, and I've seen music change other people, and that's kind of one of my focuses in my music, is to kind of inspire, not necessarily change, but just to inspire curiosity and inspire interest in the things that I write about and I sing about. I write a lot about things that I think people need to hear and that people don't want to talk about. I had a very beautiful experience where I I hurt someone pretty badly, and that person hurt me back, and I wrote a song about it, and I never thought that they would see it or hear it, but out of chance I posted it on social media, and they saw it, and we kind of reconnected through that song, and now we're close friends again. I think it can change you on a pretty fundamental level, and that's one of the beautiful things about music and art in general, you know?
I was wondering, like, when was the first time you played a concert live in front of people? Like, how many years ago was that?
Well, concert is stretching it, but
performance in front of public.
Yeah. Well, my first time playing kind of in front of the public was probably when I was 8 or 9. So that would have been 7 or 8 years ago, or 8 or 9 years ago, I guess. And the first time I played in public was just at a little farmer's market in Hazelton. And then my first kind of more formal, I guess, thing was I played at just a little side stage at the Cuspiox Valley Music Festival, which is one valley over from the Kitwanga Valley here. And I grew up going to that festival, and there's a main stage there and just a little side stage attached to it, where you can just sign up on the sign-up sheet and play between main artists, and I played there for the first time when I was 9.
No way.
And then my first real concert, I guess, with a band and where I was getting paid money for it was at that same festival when I was 14. But the first time that I played an original song on stage would have been the next year, and we got on the main stage at that festival, and we played a few original songs, and we performed the song that my cousin and I had written up here, and yeah, that was the first time that I performed anything original.
At 15?
Yeah, 15, summer of 2023.
That's a lot of, very gutsy. Like, I don't know what I was doing at 15.
Yeah, well, it was a crazy and cool experience, and it was a very vulnerable experience, because you're kind of putting all your deepest thoughts and everything, you're putting it on a piece of paper, and then you're putting music to it, and then you're putting it in front of sometimes hundreds of people, if not thousands. And it can be crazy. There were probably only maybe 100 people in the audience there, but it was still a really exciting and vulnerable and fun experience.
As I said earlier, when I was listening to your original songs, there were so many subjects that are, I felt that there was so much depth in the musical space that you're creating, and lyrical space as well. And it kind of reminded me of when I was a young artist, and I've had so many adults told me how, I had to wait to gain experience before I had anything to say, right. Or that I didn't even know what true love was because I was too young to know what love was. And I remember it feeling so icky, because I felt like everything I was feeling was so real, right? And personally, I've learned so much from people from all generations, whether they be, 2-year-old kids to elders. So I was kind of wondering how you felt about, the stereotype that young people, need to build more experience in order to have something to say, or, the typical generational thing where, this generation is lost to technology, What are your feels about that?
I don't like it. Right off the bat, I don't.
Because it doesn't feel like you fit that stereotype at all, nor many people that I know, to be honest.
Yeah, I hardly know anyone that fits that stereotype. I think it's, a pretty harmful stereotype. And although it can be true for a select number of people, I don't think that the stereotype that young people can't be wise or can't be knowledgeable or can't have anything important to say is total BS. I know a lot of young people who are wiser than a lot of old people I know. I think that the saying that you should respect your elders can be very true for a lot of people, but I'm not going to one of the things I say is, like, I'm not going to put my respect towards you just solely based on your age. You know, I'll be respectful to everyone right off the bat, of course, because I have no reason to be disrespectful, and I think everyone deserves respect. But if you're an old person and you're gonna show me that you're ignorant or that you're disrespectful towards me or towards other people, then that's no reason to be respected just because you've lived a long time. Matter of fact, I'll probably respect you less if you've been alive for 3 times as long as I have, and you're less respectful than I am, you know. And I know a lot of young people who, have lived through more than some 80-year-olds ever will. You know, I know some 15-year-olds who have gone through a lot and who know what it means to have a hard life and know what it means to lose someone and know what it means to love someone. I think everyone knows what love feels like. You know, that's something that I've experienced with playing songs about love and songs about loss. You know, I've got a couple songs that are written about people I've been in love with, and when I introduce the song, I've had a couple experiences where people will be like, "What do you mean this song is about the first person you loved? What are you, 17? How long ago was that? 2 years ago?" And I say, "Yeah, it was about 2 years ago, but what difference does that make? Like, it was still love, and it still hurt to lose that person, and it's still important to me, you know?" There's no reason to belittle someone or someone's struggles or someone's knowledge or someone's experience solely because of the amount of time they've been alive.
It is something that I've been questioning quite a bit, especially with that sentence, respect your elders.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad that you brought it up. You know, it's a sentence that need maybe clarifying.
Yeah, totally. Respect to everyone is a pretty good saying to go by, you know?
Respect, and you also said the word wisdom in there. You know, the building of wisdom. And that's a question that I personally ask myself quite a bit. Like, where did wisdom go in 2025?
Yeah.
You know?
I think it's just as present nowadays as it ever has been. I think there's a lot of kind of false notions that people are less wise now that life is easier for some people. I think some people believe that wisdom is gained through struggle or through hardship or through, you know, living for 60 years. But I think it does come from a lot of those things, but it also comes from other things. You know, wisdom can come from just spending time around the right people and spending time doing the right things and putting your heart into the right things. Like I know a lot of people who are very wise people, even though they haven't necessarily, you know, gone out and lived on the land for 10 years or traveled the world. You know, they're wise about the things that they know. You know, there's some people who have never who've never gone further than 200 kilometers away from here, and they're still wise. You know, they've still got experience. They've still got things that you can learn from them. And I think you can learn from anyone and everyone, and that, I think, shows a certain extent of wisdom in almost everyone, no matter if they're 5 years old or 85 years old. You know, and yes, an 85-year-old will probably be a little more wise than a 5-year-old, because an 85-year-old might not think that it's a good idea to eat an entire chocolate cake in one sitting, and a 5-year-old might think that it is. But a 5-year-old can still be wise. You know, 5-year-olds can still have emotional intelligence and can still, feel love and give love. Going back to knowing what love feels like. I think a 5 or 6-year-old knows what love feels like almost better than anyone else. You know, I've got some little cousins who are 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, and they're some of the most loving and emotionally intelligent people I know. So I think wisdom is just as present as it ever has been. But I think, you know, as the world changes and as society changes, the way that wisdom and knowledge and ignorance present themselves also changes, and we've just got to look out for what those changes are.
Speaking about your family,
Yeah.
you work closely with them.
Yes.
And have been for a number of years now. And that they're, you've been learning and sharing knowledge to each other through all the activities that you lead.
Yeah.
And through that, seeing that intergenerational sharing, speaking about, your parents, your cousins, your grandparents, could you speak to that importance of the intergenerational sharing that you're going, that you are living daily? And I'm curious if you have any thoughts on, maybe how should other societal structures open up to integrating more intergenerational collaboration?
Yeah, it's a really big thing for me. Being homeschooled, I've always spent quite a lot of time with my parents. I was homeschooled until grade 8, so from when I was born until I was 13, and I slept in the same bedroom as my parents until I was about 9 years old, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom for almost my entire childhood, and my dad worked remotely for about half my childhood, so I got to spend a lot of time with my parents, and I spent a lot of time learning from them. And and I think that made a big difference in me, and I see that difference in other people who spend time with their family versus people who might not. Especially with going to school and the colonial education system, I think it's an incredible tool, and it's of course necessary for so many people because, I'm an incredibly privileged and fortunate person to be able to have spent my childhood with my parents. With the colonial education system, I think it's very useful for a lot of people, but it can also be outdated, and it doesn't have the same effect. I've found that I've learned a lot more from spending time with family and friends than I ever did in school. I went to school for a couple grades, and it wasn't a very long time, but it was long enough for me to realize that I was a lot better off, working with my family and with the people that work at our business than I was in school. And I think a big part of that is being able to model myself after my parents, my grandparents, my aunties and uncles, and family friends. And that was something that I kind of lost when I was in school, was the ability to model myself after older role models. Because when I was in school, I found that I was in a classroom with, on average, 20 kids my age, and then one person like 20, 30, 50 years older. And that didn't really work for me. Like, in my way of living, I've always had someone to model after who has more life experience than me. And when I'm stuck in a classroom with 20 other kids my own age, I felt like I was growing stagnant. I think intergenerational learning is incredibly valuable and relevant, and possibly more relevant today than ever because of how much the world is changing. We're facing climate change, we're facing a lot of conflict in the world, we're facing cultural changes, climate changes, and so to be able to learn from older people who have lived through those changes before, because chances are they've had a similar experience to you, because you're descended from them and probably live in the same area of the world as them, and even though the political and economical and geological changes of the 20th century are very different from today, there are also a lot of similarities that I think we can learn from.
It's true, and having, I remember my dad telling me once we're kind of fighting about composting, and and then I was like, why don't you want to do it? And he's like, that's a problem with your generation. And it really shocked me, because I was like, well, you're living, I feel like what you're saying is having a presence where you can think together and build together, and they have that experience of seeing changes over the years. So pretty sweet to have that.
Yeah, I think a really important part of intergenerational learning is learning to kind of coexist with people who lived in different times from you and who have had different experiences from you. And that generational separation has always been very prevalent. I think it's a way of coping with changes, especially with people who are in older generations, is kind of separation of those generations, saying, it's your generation's problem, this is not my world anymore, these are not my problems anymore, I think has always been a pretty common coping mechanism. You look at people who are in Gen X and baby boomers today, or the silent generation, people who are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, they're frowning upon technology, iPhones and computers and electric vehicles, and sometimes the queer community or the different cultural communities. They're frowning upon them the same way that their parents frowned upon them for listening to rock and roll music and for being hippies and for driving Ford trucks and for all the things that they did. There's always been generational separation. So I think it's really important to find common ground with different generations. So I think that's another really valuable thing about working in close proximity with different generations, because my parents are in their 40s, my mom's in her early 50s, and then I have coworkers in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. So I've got a lot of people that I can learn from, and who I hope can learn from me. I think that's a big thing. Is people always talk about learning from older generations, but it's not very talked about for older generations to learn from the younger generations. And I think although the older generations don't have as long left on this planet, they can still learn just as much. Some people who have come to our farm who are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, I've seen them change and grow and learn more than some younger people that I know.
And from the farm, I'm gathering also from what you're saying, which when I was going on I was looking through, of course, all the actions that you guys are doing with Tea Creek, and there's one word that stuck out to me in the description, and it was reconciliation.
Yes.
And so I kind of wanted to just hear you talk about the difference between, reconciliation and reconciliation, and that conscious decision of putting that on your website.
Yeah. Well, my experience and my family's experience and my father's experience is that reconciliation, what a lot of people think of as reconciliation, is sitting down with your white friends with a cup of coffee and talking about all the issues that Indigenous people and people of color are facing. The end. That's reconciliation. Okay, we talked about it. Great. Now we know what's going on, and we're gonna donate $10 to the conversation, to the organizations that are bringing food to Gaza. And now that's reconciliation. I'm gonna go and participate in a painting workshop led by an Indigenous person, and those things are small steps, and those things are, those are often classified as reconciliation. And although they're good things to do, it's nowhere near enough. In my experience, reconciliation is going out and not only talking to your friends about it and learning what the issues that people of color are facing, especially Indigenous peoples, but also what you can do to help, as long as the journey doesn't end at having that conversation, that conversation is reconciliation, and then going out and doing work is reconciliation. I deal with a lot of grief, especially on Red Dress Day and Orange Shirt Day, because a lot of people who want to participate in reconciliation will wear an orange shirt and make their temporary profile picture on Facebook an orange blank sheet, and they don't. And although those actions are fueled by good intentions, they're not enough. And a lot of people think that apologizing is also going to make a difference, that's reconciliation, but my analogy is pre-colonization, Indigenous culture was like a sheet of paper. And then European colonizers came along and they crumpled up that piece of paper and they lit it on fire. And then, we blew out the fire, so the paper's not completely burnt out, but the paper's still crumpled up. And so what a lot of people are doing is they're looking at that crumpled up piece of paper and they're saying, I'm sorry. But does apologizing to that piece of paper uncrumple it? No, it doesn't. So we need to work together as a community to kind of uncrumple that piece of paper and make sure that we're not tearing it, that we're not making the problem worse. And slowly but surely we're going to flatten out that piece of paper again, but those burnt edges are still there. That damage is still there, and there's still going to be wrinkles in the paper from when it was crumpled up. But working together as a community, I think, and as a country, and as humans across the world, I'm hoping that we can start to uncrumple that paper, because here in Canada that paper is still very crumpled up and a lot of people are apologizing to it, and as great as it is to see those apologies happening, those apologies aren't uncrumpling the paper. And I think to stop focusing on the past and start focusing on the future, because a lot of people are still talking about the past and focusing on that, and as important as the past is, there are a lot of lessons that we can learn from the past, like the damages that were done by residential schools and the Indian Act and those things, but there's a lot of things that I think we need to learn to focus on the future, not only talking about change but making that change happen, getting out into the community, doing community work, talking to people, educating yourself, asking people what you can do. Because there's a lot of people who say, well, I don't know what I can do. I'm not an Indigenous person. I've never done this before. I don't know what to do. So educate yourself, learn what you can do, find out what to do. You've got to almost, like, most of the population has a supercomputer in their pocket every day. We've got iPhones, we've got social media, we've got search engines that we can use to educate ourselves. And we've got 2 legs and 2 eyes and 2 ears and a mouth, so we can go out and we can ask people what we need to do, and we can learn and we can educate ourselves and we can start taking action. And we've got a long way to go, but part of reconciliation is just taking those first steps. Sometimes reconciliation is working towards Indigenous food sovereignty, and sometimes reconciliation is going out and playing a song, and sometimes reconciliation is going and talking to politicians and doing the really, really hard stuff, and to me, reconciliation shows up in a lot of different ways.
It's a huge step.
It's a lot of work. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of us are guilty of not wanting to put in that work, especially with the environment. I'm guilty of it. I still drive a gas car. Every day I live with the knowledge that I'm putting carbon monoxide into the atmosphere, and I'm actively, buying single-use plastics, and I'm fueling up my car and burning gasoline, and I'm doing a lot of things that harm the planet. And the reality is I could be doing better.
There is a tension there.
There's a tension there, yeah. And I think a lot of people live with the knowledge that we could be doing better. And so I think another part of reconciliation is just taking action on that knowledge that you could be doing better and starting to do better. You know, and that's not to say that you should stop driving your gas car and that you should get off of Indigenous land and that you should go back to Europe where you came from. You know, that's not what, you know, there's a lot of people who are pushing back against the land back movement because they think that land back means move out of your house, get off our land. But that's not what land back is. You know, land back is maybe just meeting the chief whose territory you live on and having those important conversations, and being respectful to the land that you live on and acknowledging that it's not your land. You know, this property that we're sitting on right now, it's not my property. You know, it's just a part of the earth. It's a part of the earth, and it's Gitxsan land. It's unceded Gitxsan territory. Yeah, I'm not as knowledgeable as other people are on these subjects, but you don't have to have a PhD or a master's in socioeconomics or politics or any of those fancy titles in order to make a difference.
That is very true. And sometimes, you know, small actions then it has a snowball effect also. And, you know, I know that the first times that I, you know, took that step to go meet, there's a form of, you know, this desire of, say, telling people, hey, go meet the land, go meet the people, go meet the communities, right?
Yeah.
And I remember for me how scary that was that first time, because I was like, oh, like, what are you gonna say? Like, it's gonna be awkward. And it's just like, oh no, people are very friendly.
Yeah.
Like, okay, like, this is fun, let's go.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard, but it's fun, and it's a form of reckoning also.
Yeah.
I find, and for me in my process, you know.
Yeah.
Understanding. And you're talking at the end also of, you know, that you know, getting to know the land that you're on. And I was wondering, because we've been talking a lot about, you know, the knowledge that we gain from other generations and the people around us, and I was wondering, what's the biggest learning that you've received from a non-human being in your life?
I'm learning to live, I think, is a very big lesson, and it's one that's really, really complicated, but also painstakingly simple. It's just learning to live without too much craziness, without too much, you know, complication, you know.
In French, we say without fla-fla.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. And yeah, just like learning from the birds and from cats and dogs and moose and bears to just kind of just live and just enjoy. Just to enjoy and to tolerate things that you don't love and to take joy in the things that you can get. You know, I see bears eating Saskatoons on the side of the highway, and I think, you know, they're 10 feet away from a highway where they could get killed, but they're also sitting there eating some good Saskatoons, and that's a great way to live. It's like, there's so many things in the world that are going on that are tough to deal with and that are hard to face, but we've also got Saskatoons. And those Saskatoons could be metaphorical Saskatoons. You know, those Saskatoons could be playing music. Those Saskatoons are just whatever you find joy in, you know. And I think it's good to be able to kind of, like, a lot of the time you have to cross that highway, and you could get hit, and you could get, something could hurt you and something could harm you, but it's also nice to be able to just sit down and eat some metaphorical Saskatoons.
I love that. And my last question for you before we close it off with my 3 little ones, is, if any, what do you think is the responsibility of artists or art in 2025?
To do what you can to inspire change, like what you were saying earlier. I think as a human being, you have a responsibility to not stand by and let other people get hurt and to let horrible things happen. Myself as an artist, I try to use my platform to talk about things that are important to me, not only things that are happening in, not only big wars that are happening and big political movements and yada yada yada, but also just the things that we as human beings have the power to change. Because you don't have to change the entire world. Like it starts in your own community. It starts in your own friend circle, going back to reconciliation. Like you can inspire change starting in your hometown, in your workplace, in your school. Yeah, talk about things that matter and sometimes you have to be the person who talks about the things that no one else is really talking about and that no one else really wants to talk about. And sometimes you got to be okay with other people telling you to shut up, or other people laughing in your face, and other people disagreeing. As humans, we're gonna disagree on a whole bunch of things. But I think a lot of people can agree that we shouldn't just stand by and let bad things happen.
The icebergs are melting, and the bombs they will drop. But the profit of war is too much to be stopped. Rich politicians sleep soundly at night, while the small people suffer and the weak people fight. The earth cries for mercy, and the stars cry for shame, but the men are too busy making war in God's name. The girls cry for freedom behind bars forged by men, while their mothers are aching, trying not to give in.
Thank you so much for this conversation, Ezra.
Thank you for having this conversation with me.
Of course, there's a lot to think about. And to close off this conversation, I asked all my guests to answer those 3 little questions. Mm-hmm. So first question is, what's a book that changed you and why?
I don't do a lot of reading, I will admit, but when I was a kid, it's a little bit of a weird answer, but I was big into building Lego. I played a lot of Lego, and as a homeschooled kid, that was one of my early creative outlets. And I kind of taught myself math with Lego, with how to build different things, how many studs were here, this and that, and blah blah blah. But I had a book. And it was a Lego ideas book, and it was a bunch of different creations from other people who had built Lego, and that book kind of taught me to think outside the box, and not only with playing Lego, but also with just art and life in general. It taught me that you don't have to take things at face value. You don't have to always follow the rules. It was just, it helped me creatively.
My second question is there an artist or an art piece that changed you and how?
My friend Eli really helped me out. Elijah Quinn, shout out Eli. I grew up listening to his music. He's changed the way I think about music. I took music lessons with him starting when I was about 8, and he taught me to have fun with music. And he's not only a great person, but also a really great artist. Shout out Eli, if you're seeing this. I love you, man. Thanks for everything.
And to close everything off, Is there a project that you want to share that you're proud of, or a final story or anecdote with our listeners?
Oh man. There's a couple that pop into my head, but a project that I'm really proud of is being part of Tea Creek. I'm really proud of being part of that. I've found that it's made a difference in me, and it's given me the power to make a difference in my community. And an upcoming project that I'm quite proud of is I'm working on an EP, so it'll probably, by the time this is out, it'll hopefully be out. But I'm really proud of the band that I've formed, and the people that I've met, and the community that has kind of created itself and been created in this area around me and around music and art. And I'm really proud of the music that I'm making and the people that I'm playing it with, I think. But I think I saw this question in the file that you sent me, and I was trying to think of a bunch of cool, crazy answers, but I think, I'm really proud to just be working on the things I'm working on, to be creating music, and also to be working on the farm, working at Tea Creek, getting to meet people from all walks of life, and to be able to work with them and eat with them and live life with them I'm really proud to be part of that.
There's a lot to be proud about.
Yeah.
Big projects on both ends. Thank you so much for your time and how vulnerable you are and open.
Yeah.
And I wish you a lot of luck in recording that EP then.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited. Yeah.
All right. I wish you a beautiful summer, and we'll see you very soon on a stage near us.
Yes. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Ezra.